Hello everybody, Nikolai here. Today I have a review for you of another shining Russian gem. Last time I looked at the Shirogorov Hati, which is very incredible knife. Today I look at smaller version, Shirogorov NeOn. It's still made by Shirogorov Brothers. See, look. Shirogorov Neckarsmark. Beautiful. And is absolutely spectacular. Sorry about that. I should get that looked at. This is an absolutely spectacular knife. I'm a real big fan of it. And I've been looking forward to picking one up someday for a long time and looking forward to reviewing it ever since I got it. So, let's just go on ahead and do a quick size comparison. So here is your Spyderco Delica. Here is your Ontario Ratu. Here is your ZT452CF, which is much larger, but another Russian design. Here is your Slish Bowie, a Polish design. And here is the NeOn's big brother, the Shirogorov F95. I'm going to be reviewing this guy here soon. The NeOn convinced me to go for the big guy as well. But you can see that this is not a huge knife, and that's in many ways an absolutely wonderful thing. Before we get going too much further, I want to do a quick disassembly, because this is an interesting knife on the inside. I already posted a full, how to reassemble and maintain video, but we're going to take this apart real quick with some movie magic. So ready? Here we go. Bam! Okay, so this is your Shirogorov NeOn completely disassembled. And, so let me show you a couple of interesting things. First and foremost, if we look at the inside and outsides of the scales here, we can see that they've done some milling on the inside of the scale as well as on the outside, which is nice. It's a good little bit of extra style. It's completely unnecessary. It maybe shaves off a little tiny bit of weight, but not really enough to matter. But clearly they gave a damn. And so the NeOn it's a sign of, well, somebody who gave a damn. That's nice. On this side here, we can see a couple of other interesting things. Your stop pin is just loose, floating around in there, but that's okay. You can see that the clip screw is actually attached on the inside with the same hardware. You can see here, it's a screw that very much matches the outside screw there and holds it in place. Good. You can see, what else here? Oh, you can see a nice little milled out area in which the backspacer rests, and that's this guy here. The backspacer lives inside that little groove, and that's one of the things that contributes to the fact that once the knife is fully disassembled, if you look down through here, you're not going to see any light of day. It's perfectly fit up against the inside of the knife. And that's just a nice thing in general. I'm a big fan of that. What else is a beautiful thing in here? Actually, two not so beautiful things. First off, you can see that the lock bar insert here, it does serve as an over-travel stop very slightly, in that you've got this little portion. Hopefully you can see. There we go. You got this little portion here, which catches on this little portion right here and prevents the lock bar from going too far in that direction. One other interesting thing, though, is that's not so beautiful, is that the lock bar insert here is not replaceable. You can see that it's actually press fit in, and then there's a little bit of adhesive used. I asked the Shirogorovs about that, and so you can't replace the lock bar insert in this guy, as opposed to on, for instance, this is your Shirogorov F95, pardon me, where you can see that there is actually a screw going into the other side. I'd flip this over, but it's full of ball bearings, and that just seems like it would end in suffering and tears. So that's something to keep in mind. You got your detent ball here. You've got your race for your bearings. You've got the inside of the more milling over here. The other thing to point out is the multi-row bearing system. So MRBS, as they call it right here, just involves a set of bearings, but it's on top of the, there we go, focused in. You can see that each one of those little bearing holes gets filled with a bearing, and so they end up in two little tiny rows. In fact, if you look at the blade of the knife, you can see, come on, focus, there you go, two little tiny lines where each, basically, row of the bearings sits. And that's one of the things that allows the blade to be so secure, yet rolling so smoothly. Beautiful thing. I'm a big fan of that. So, the only other thing to point out is that this is the pivot. And note that there are no asymmetries, there are no grooves, there are no bumps. There is nothing to prevent this from spinning around inside the pivot hole. which means, and the back side of it is completely smooth. And that means that if you happen to be not a brilliant man, maybe you, I don't know, Nick Shabazz or something like that, and you use a little bit too much Loctite on this, you're gonna have a bad time. Because on the one side, you can, be unscrewing it, but it's just going to keep rotating in the back and rotating and rotating and rotating until you have to borrow your fiance's hairdryer and, whoa there, and basically heat up the Loctite so it gives way while wearing a latex glove, which gives you a little bit of extra friction against that, and then you're doing okay. But that's not stellar, and I'll be getting back to that one a little bit later. But regardless, overall, the construction on this guy is very nice. I'm a big fan of it, and yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and put this guy back together using a little tiny bit of movie magic. Actually, one more thing. I happen to have a Shirogorov F95 sitting here, disassembled as well, and you can see here that this has, come on now, there we go, Shirogorov single row bearing system. So contrasting with the double row bearings down here. Multi-row, that is. So, yeah, that's the difference between the single row over here and the multi-row over here. I'll just drop those little bearings in there later on, but that's interesting, and I'll show you the disassembly of that in the F95 video. So, I'm going to put this guy back together now with some movie magic, this time for realsies. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Bam! Okay, so now that we've seen what the inside looks like and some of the interesting, the bearing system is really cool. Some of the interesting stuff on the inside here, let's go ahead and jump into the good, the bad, and the ugly of this particular pocket knife. First, let's focus on the good. And the biggest good that this knife has going for it is the action. The action on this is just incredible. I mean, if you hit the flipper tab, every time it pops open, and it does so very satisfyingly. It locks up nicely. I mean, this is a joy in the hand. And on the closing action, too. Watch this. I'm going to very slowly rotate it over, and it falls shut on its own weight. Again, I'm trying so hard not to let it fall down, and it's fallen. And to give you a point of comparison, the ZT452CF is another very, very excellent knife. But in order to get it to fall shut, you need to give it a little encouragement. You need to shake it a little bit. Versus on this guy, it is just flat out, it falls shut no matter what you do. And this is just running on basic nano oil up in the bearings, like I showed you in that reassembly video and maintenance. So the action is incredible. And honestly, this is the first knife that I have owned that is in the same league as the Grimsmo Norseman. So, which one is smoother? I don't know 100%. I think the Norseman is a little bit smoother, just in that it feels like there's a little less friction. But at the same time, these are so close. They're very much competitive, and the Norseman's got a heavier blade. I'm not willing to make a call. So at the very least, these two knives are in the same league in terms of action, even if one of them might win one round, another one might win the other. Very, very competitive. And so I'm in love with it. The action on this is so nice, and the bearings are just so damn smooth. It's absolutely, it's a joy to me, and I'm a fan of fiddly mechanical joys. So that's the first good thing, is the action is incredible. There are also some really good features here. For instance, if you look at the clip, there is no clip screw here. The clip screw is actually internal. You saw it in the disassembly video. That's nice. There's an over-travel stop like you saw in the disassembly. There's a lock bar insert. The lanyard hole on this guy is very stealthy, which means that if you want to have a lanyard, you can. But if you don't, the knife isn't bigger because there's a hole for it, which is good. The ergonomics are very good, very solid. There's a little bit lacking maybe back in here, but by and large, I have no problem with the ergonomics of this knife. It feels very natural in the hand. Big fan of that. The size on this knife is also really, really nice. I do like the F95, the big brother, another shining Russian gem. But the thing is, this is just a little bit huge, and it's a little bit murdery. And the Neon is small enough that nobody really, truly gives a damn. So I love the size on this. And it's also, it's under 3.5 inches, so it's legal in a lot of places. And it's not very heavy, particularly at all. Let me get out my scale. You'd think after doing this so long, I'd, have the scale ready and zeroed. But we're looking at 3.28 ounces here, which is, more than something like your Delica, sure, but it is less than other larger knives, like your Slish Bowie there, or even this guy, which is pretty lightweight. So this is a very small, fairly lightweight knife. Big fan of that. So the size is just great and makes this a really compelling small knife sort of carry. You saw the internal milling for style, and I like that a lot, not because it's meaningful, but because it's cool. They really are trying to make this an excellent knife, and so I like that a lot. That's a detail. The flipper tab is actually fairly subtle, but it more than does the trick. And that's a beautiful thing, because sometimes on knives, like this is your ZT 562CF here, the flipper tab sticks way out there, and so it kind of attacks whatever else is in your pocket. And as somebody who keeps his knife in the same pocket as the phone and the wallet, I do appreciate a flipper tab that's not out for blood. That's a nice thing. The Shirogorov Maker's Mark is absolutely beautiful. I say that every time, but I really like it. To me, it's second only to the Slish Maker's Mark here, which is just stellar. And the Greensmos do okay with it too, but, nonetheless, I love the Maker's Mark. The knife itself is pretty simple. I mean, you saw in the disassembly there that you've got 2 screws here, and that's really it. And that's all you need to take it apart. So I like the fact that it's simple. It's straightforward. There's not a lot of fiddly parts. The only thing that's fiddly are the bearings, and, that's a little fiddly. But still, the fit and finish on this guy is incredible in that all of the finishes are very uniform. The sides look a lot like the backspacer, look a lot like the others, and the milling is done very nicely. It flips smoothly at 100% torque, so if you lock the pivot down completely, it flips like a dream still, so that's a good sign of fit and finish. And there are no gaps, there are no misalignments, there's really nothing else wrong with this in terms of fit and finish. All the surfaces that shouldn't be sharp are not sharp, all the surfaces that are should be, and that's nice. And then finally, the other thing that I love so much about this guy is the blade, because it's an M390 blade, which is nice, and it may end up beating S35VN to become my favorite steel. I am a big fan of M390, but it's also really nicely ground. It's very thin behind the edge. It is an incredible slicer here, and because it's a full flat grind, and it's so nicely done, this is one of the best cutting knives that I own. Absolutely. It is an incredible knife as a functional cutting tool. And because it's a beefy frame lock, there's no real concern that it's going to be injured by anything. This is among the best functional knives I've got. And that's really saying something. So that's your good. The action is incredible. The features are good. The size is great. They've got a lot of little nice details, the Maker's Mark, the internal milling. It's simple, the fit and finish is right on, and the blade as a functional cutting tool makes me cry good. So there's a lot of good here. Unfortunately, there is also some bad. Let's jump into that. So on the bad front, a couple of things. One thing that doesn't bother me at all, but bothers some people, is that the tang of the blade here is exposed. There's a little gap between the tang and the handle here. I know it drives some people crazy. I'm not one of them, but figured I'd mention it just in case. One thing that leaves me a little more cold is the flathead hardware. It's nice in that you can actually use a standard US penny to open this, and you can use a dime in the back, although I still use a flathead driver. But I don't quite get it. One of the reasons they use flathead hardware is that it's easy to field service your knife, so if you get gunk all up in it, you can take it apart. But the thing is, this is a knife with loose bearings. You are not going to field surface it. So it's just style. But to be fair, it is kind of Shirogorov's shtick. So, I'm not going to begrudge him too hard. But I think I would still probably prefer Torx just for ease of disassembly. The lock bar insert, like I showed you, is press fit and glued in. That shouldn't matter. And honestly, you're probably not going to get replacement parts on a knife that's made by one small workshop in Russia. But at the same time, that's, I don't know, left me a little bit on the cold side. Not quite perfection. Aesthetically speaking, I like the knife a lot. There's a lot of good styling here, but it's a little bit monochrome. There's really only one color to it, and that's gray. Maybe the blade is a little bit lighter gray than the back part here, but I do kind of wish that they had maybe polished up the back spacer or done a little bit of anodization to make it a little tiny bit more visually compelling. The waves are nice, but it just kind of comes across as a bit of a gray mass. And so, you know, that's a little bit of an issue. And then the last bad thing I'm going to talk about is the price. At retail in the United States, these go for about $650, and there's a markup there on top of the Russian prices for sure. On the secondary market, where you're going to find most of these can go from anywhere from, you know, well, ideally $650 to $750. I've even seen them at $8. And that's a lot of money, and the secondary market prices are a little bit silly. So, you know, that's bad. This is a lot of money right here, and we'll touch on that again in a little while. So the bad is the exposed tang, the flathead hardware, the glued lock bar insert, and the fact that there's just not that much aesthetically going on here. What's the ugly? Let's go there. So there are 3 bits of ugly here. First and foremost for me is the pocket clip. The pocket clip is very attractive, fits the knife well, but the thing is, 2 big issues. First, there's only one single point of contact. Hopefully you can see that down there. And over here, it really only touches the fabric of your pants at one single sharp point. And that means that this pocket clip is going to be death destroyer of pants. I haven't killed any pants wearing it yet, but it's still going to be much harsher than a clip, for instance, that's got a wider point of contact and a very thick section where it does. So that's something you got to keep in mind. The other negative of the clip is that it's very stiff. A good clip will have a fair amount of spring to it. Here's your Spyderco Sleesh Bowie wire clip, and this is the best clip Spyderco makes and among the better clips out there. This guy just doesn't have any spring really at all. I mean, it's got a little tiny bit, but that means that really when you put this in your pocket, you are compressing the fabric underneath the clip rather than the clip is bending up to meet the fabric. And so that means that it's a little bit hard to get into a pocket which, you know, has a thicker layer of fabric or something like that. I can still do it one-handed, and it works with all of the pants that I've tried so far, but especially if you've got thicker fabric, the pocket clip is kind of a bad idea. So, you know, it works, but it's just not a great pocket clip, and I would really prefer if they, you know, shipped a better version. That's something that gives me trouble. So that's your first ugly. Second ugly I actually already talked about during the disassembly, and that's the fact that the pivot rotates freely and there's no tooling on this side. Like I said earlier, it's a pain, and it means that if you screw up, there's a fairly small margin for error, and you're doing weird things with hair dryers and coins and latex gloves that, you know, you shouldn't be expected to do in a free society. So that's not a big fan, and that's genuine ugly, because all they needed to do was mill an asymmetry or do some kind of a bump or something. And so this is workable as it is, and it's not a disqualifier to buy the knife, but it should have been addressed. And the third bit of ugly is that despite this price, $650 retail, there are still 2 really genuinely ugly things: a poorly designed pocket clip and a free spinning pivot. And at this price, I shouldn't be finding ugly. I should be finding some good, obviously lots of good, and maybe a little bit of bad. But flat-out design flaws should not be present in a $650 knife. That burns me a little bit. So there's your ugly: the pocket clip, the free rotating pivot, and the fact that there were 2 ugly things on a knife this damn pricey. So what's the final conclusion on your Shirogorov NeOn? Let's go ahead and find out. Honestly, this is the best small knife I own. I have some better knives. The Greensboro Norseman is slightly better, but it's also huge and ridiculous. The Sleesh Bowie is also just really great, but it's big in the pocket. It's a large knife. But in terms of small blades, this is just the best, and I love it. I mean, the size is great in that it's big enough to get the job done, but it's small enough that it's not so scary. The steel is great. The blade is great. This is an incredible functional cutting tool. Apples and phone books just cower before this knife, and that's a beautiful thing. And to top it all off, the action is really second to none. It's a great, great action for a pocket knife. And so there's really nothing I can say about this, aside from the fact that it's a beautiful, shining Russian gem. I mean, it's got its flaws. Sure, the pocket clip sucks, the pivot sucks. I wish it were a little less plain in some ways, and the price is just barely acceptable. But even given all of that, this is a beautiful, great knife, and it's sticking around in my collection. And for me, it beats the cost carry comfort curve. I'll link the video below, but it's so good that I just don't care that it's expensive. I will carry this guy, and I have been carrying this, and it's been kicking some other really incredible knives out of my pocket. And so, yeah, this guy's sticking around. Maybe someday it'll get dethroned. Maybe someday it'll find a new home. Maybe someday I'll get a custom Neon. Who knows? But for the moment, I really, really do not like this knife. Even after the honeymoon, even seeing the flaws, this is a stellar knife. And so only you know whether a $700 pocket knife makes sense to you. If you're my kind of crazy and you're looking at this and thinking, yeah, I might do that, then do it. You're going to love it. But, yeah. So really, there you go. That's your Shirogorov NeOn Lite. It's a gem. Expensive gem. But, oh, man. Is it beautiful? So, I hope this has been interesting for you and that you have a wonderful rest of your day.